let's look at what tuples are in C#. Now, for most of my training, I work to give you an in-depth perspective on technology. But sometimes you just need to get the quick answer to the question, how do I use this? So that's why I created the 10-minute training series. So let's dive right into this code. Now, here I have a little bit of code set up in Visual Studio 2022 in a console application. So what I have here is this method called validateAddress. Now, of course, this is all sample data and sample code, but essentially you pass in a string here. And what I want to happen, and it's not complete yet, what I want to happen is if the address equals 123 Sesame ST, then I want to return 123 Sesame Street like that and say, yes, that's valid. But if it's not this, then I want to say, no, that's an invalid address. Okay, so this is a very rudimentary sample of how you do validation, where you really want to return more than one value. So this validation for validateAddress, I want to return the validated, properly formatted street address. Okay, that's a pretty common thing for addresses where you type in a street address, however, you abbreviate or whatever, and then it goes, did you mean this? And it creates the nicer format, and you have a better address because it's then standardized for what the postal system is expecting. So we want that. We want it to format it pretty, but we also want to make sure that it's a valid address too, because if I put the address of 1, well, that's not a valid address. Therefore, it should return back and say, that's not a valid address, not validate the address by making it formatted correctly. You can't format correctly an invalid address. So I want to return 2 pieces of data here. Now, one way that we used to do this is we'd create a class, where we create a class that's just basically for returning information from validateAddress, and that's kind of messy. The other way to do it would be to make this an out variable, where what it would do is it would change this so that it not only sends it in, but also sends the data back out. And again, that gets kind of messy because now you've got parameters in line that are also returning values. It's actually, I think, outref. I haven't done this in a while. But anyways, we're not going to do that because we now have tuples. We don't have to do this. Tuples, the idea is instead of creating a class just for one method to return 2 pieces of data or more, you can do 3, 4, 5, or more. But the idea is instead of creating a class just for that one scenario and then just clogging up your project with a whole bunch of classes that are only used in one place for one use, we can just create a return type that has more than one parameter in it. So what we're going to do is set this up so that we have more than one parameter being returned. The way you do that is by using parentheses. And you can say, I want to return both a string and a Boolean. Now, I'm not a big fan of this, but this does work. And the reason I'm not a big fan of it is because, yes, you could do that, but then they're not named. So it's going to be type 1 and type 2, I think. So if we were to grab this here, var result equals, and then look at result, dot, it's item 1. So it's item 1 and item 2. Well, what does item 1 represent? I don't know. This is why you don't name it that way. Okay. Instead, what you should say is string address, and then bool is going to be is valid. And now when you see the result, you can say dot address and is valid. So you have both of those on that value. So now what we can do is we can say if address equals 123 Sesame Street, we're going to return and put in parentheses here, return this and true, meaning it's both valid and here is the correct address. For this one, what we're going to do is we're going to return, and we can return the same address and false if we want to. That way they know what was invalid. Well, it was the address you passed in. So we can do that if we want. So with that, we now have this method returning a tuple. Again, you can put comma and put more types here if you want. If you get too crazy, that's a little over the top. Maybe you should use a class. But for things where it's just a one-off kind of thing, this makes a lot of sense. And now we have var result, or I could say, I could actually, name this the tuple, but we don't have to because it already knows what that type is, and that's the whole tuple, which has both values inside of it, like we saw. So we could say result.address, and we can say result.isValid. Okay, so with that, we can enable the rest of this, where we say result.isValid. If result is valid, then print out, let's put our string interpolation here, and say result.address. And then down here, we can say it's an invalid address. If we run this now, we're going to see that your validated address is 123 Sesame Street. And if we change this to, let's just knock off the one at the beginning, so it's now the incorrect address, it's going to say that's an invalid address. So it knows both values being returned. But we could also go one step further and say, hey, what if we want to knock this out into two variables instead? Well, we can do that by saying string message, string is, or let's just say valid. I know it should be is valid probably because the fact that, oops, not string, bool. It knew that. I forgot it. Because the fact that I just want to show that you can rename these. So message isn't the same as address. Valid isn't the same, but that will allow you to create independent variables like this. And that will still work. So you can name them whatever you want. Now, this is what's called a deconstructor. Not a destructor, that's different. This is a deconstructor, which deconstructs our tuple back into separate parts. Okay? Now, the cool thing is, maybe you don't care about all the parts for every return. Maybe you just want the validated address, and you don't really care about is valid or whatever. So in that case, let's just do this again down below, because I don't want to mess up this code right here, but let's comment it out so you have it for later if you want this code. By the way, if you want the code, it's down in the description. But we could use a discard character, which is an underscore. We're basically saying, I don't care about if it's valid or not. I just want the resulting message or address. Okay? That discard character says, I don't care about that part of it, just give me the part I do care about. So we can also use the discard character for things that maybe you don't want in every situation when we're calling this method. Maybe sometimes we just want the validated address and don't care if it's valid or not. We just want it formatted properly if we can. Okay? Well, that would be how we do it, using the discard character, which ignores that variable part of the tuple being returned. Okay, so that's tuples. They're primarily useful for returning multiple parameters from a method. That's the big deal about tuples. You can use it in other circumstances, but really it comes down to that's the important one that we use it for. All right, let me know what your thoughts are with tuples. Do you use them? Do you not use them? Have you even seen them before? Let me know down in the comments. I'd appreciate a little bit of interaction. Let me know what you found valuable. Thanks for watching, and as always, I am Tim Corey.